as well. Welcome to the podcast review show. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me as my partner in crime is Eric K. Johnson. Eric, how's it going, buddy?
Things are great here, Dave. Thanks for asking. Tonight on the show, it's all about Westworld. Troy Heinrichs joins us. He's one of the two co-hosts of the Beyond Westworld podcast. Troy, thanks for being here. Give us a little Reader's Digest nutshell of what your podcast is all about.
It's a TV fan after show about HBO's Westworld. We chose the name Beyond Westworld because many don't know from the old Westworld days of the 70s ago, there used to be an actual TV show called Beyond Westworld that aired on CBS in the 1980s for all of 2 episodes. I believe it wasn't actually made the air. So we thought, hey, why not SEO, Beyond Westworld, get that juice going, and figure we'd pop up. And we were actually the first Westworld podcast to actually make it into Apple Podcasts. But not the biggest, unfortunately. But we're working on it. That's why we're here tonight. We get together a day after the show airs and take fan community questions, about 30,000 or so people in the Facebook group, and just curate a community and talk about real heady stuff.
That's a fantastic group for not being the biggest show. You have quite the social media juice there, my friend.
I would assume that our call to action should be, if you're in the Facebook group, subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what we're talking about, just to play the clip, for me, I love this. I'll play the actual beginning here in a second. But at one point you say this in your show.
Thanks to those of you that voted. Keep an eye out for a weekly guest survey we post on Twitter at Westworld Fans, on Instagram at Beyond Westworld, or in the Facebook group, 29,000 strong. Just search for Beyond Westworld.
Yeah, so when I heard 29,000 strong, I was like, dang. So that was a nice just proof of concept, and like, hey, it boosts that fear of missing out. But here's the actual intro of the show.
Welcome to Beyond Westworld, and boy, have we got an offering for you. Beyond Westworld is where we attempt to make all of your podcast fantasies come true by diving deep into the heart of the HBO series Westworld. I'll be your host, Aaron Peterson, and joining us today is my fellow sentient host, Troy Heinrichs.
When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how simple, must be the truth.
Yeah, whatever that means. Just stick my consciousness into a body. That's all I really want out of this whole ordeal.
A better looking one.
Oh, if you could pick it, yeah. We'll get back to that.
Sure. Thanks for spending your vacation with us this week as we discuss the 4th episode of Season 2 called The Riddle of the Sphinx. It aired May 13th, 2018, and was written by Jonathan Nolan and his partner, and was directed by Lisa Joy Nolan, which was her directorial debut ever. And let me say,
great job.
She did a great job. So that was, and then you jumped, I think, right into the question from the audience, if I remember right. But Eric, what were your thoughts on just the initial kicking off the show?
I like the way the show kicks off and tells me what it's all about. Tells me what the show, what the podcast is all about. Links it back to the show. I love the fact that you give the date and the episode, so you know, because it's an after show and we're talking about a particular episode. It gets me right into which episode we're talking about. When it was released, who wrote it, all of the nuts and bolts right there, so we can get into discussing. We don't have to take care of a whole lot of housekeeping. I love the quick pace of the opening, and I thought we jumped right into it, which I liked.
Yeah, the only thing, because I like the quick pace, and I noticed it again when we just played that clip about the 29,000. Aaron, a lot of Red Bull that night or something going on. He's a little, like, when he explains, welcome to the Westworld, and I see a lot of people do this. Like when somebody says, Dave, where are you from? And I go, oh, I'm from the podcast review show. Like, for some reason, when we're promoting our stuff, because in our brain, we're kind of like, oh, it's the same, it's the show. And then we go into our description. Oh, it's the time when we did the thing. And I mean, if I just play that one little clip he did again.
Thanks to those of you that voted. Keep an eye out for a weekly guest survey we post on Twitter at Westworld Fans, on Instagram at Beyond Westworld, or in the Facebook group, 29,000 strong. Just search for Beyond Westworld.
That is, that's a pace. I kind of was waiting for him to go, sold to the man in the back.
He had to take a breath like halfway through.
But that's the only thing I noticed, that I was like, wow, that is, and I don't know if it's just that thing, like I mentioned, it's our stuff. We've said it a million times. Pull our string and and off we go. But
when I coach radio talent, I have to remind them that, because radio talent say the name of the station every time they crack the mic. And because they say it 50 times a day, 5 days a week, thousands and thousands of times every year, it becomes a little throwaway statement because they've said it. And I always tell them, slow down and take pride in what you're talking about. Right there, he said something. That's probably the fourth time I've heard him say whatever the fan survey thing is, and he reads it so quickly, and it's all a big run together sentence because he said it so many times and he's so comfortable saying it. It's like when you say a tongue twister or something like that over and over and over again, you can say it faster and faster and faster every time because it becomes natural. It's muscle memory, and you want to slow down and take some pride in it. You can't expect your audience to take pride or appreciate and value what you're saying if you just throw it away like that and say, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and here's the thing, and you're rolling right through it, and they're like, oh well, he didn't stop down and take time with it. It's like if you stop and pause, people go, oh, this must be important because he's like really emphasizing it and he's stopping and making a point to it. But if you roll right through it and you're like, it's like, I need to get through all of that to get to the good stuff. So don't even bother paying attention to that. That's the show. We'll get into it a little bit more. The show is interesting because there are times where you do that and you throw it away. But there are other times where the conversation almost comes to a halt and loses momentum because you get sidetracked with some minutia that doesn't have to do with the conversation. And it's kind of interesting because I oftentimes see one or the other, and you manage to do both of them. So I'll kind of point those out as we kind of go through the show here.
The thing I was worried about, or anytime I ever listen to a TV show podcast, I'm like, oh, I haven't watched the episode yet, or things like that. So I thought it was really cool that you kind of put a disclaimer and you put your audience at ease.
Are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure everything has to do with loss. You walk outside, somebody.
I'm glad I left that part in here. This is one of the things that Eric was talking about. It's a sidestep that I was so that's the beginning of this clip, and then you'll hear the no spoilers part.
Are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure everything has to do with loss. You walk outside, somebody touches your mailbox, you're like, well, that's just like an episode 6.2 of Lost. Everything.
Are you done ranting now?
See? Because he knows it's true.
Don't tell me what I can't do.
If you are a new listener, subscriber, I'm really sorry, but welcome. I'm so glad you found the door. If you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back to the park. On our show, first, we dive into our story and the character analysis. We then hear from each of you, our most valued guests, before going off our loop entirely as we break the code on all things spoilery or majorly theorized that could turn into a future storyline. We want to emphasize, we never talk about anything that's an actual spoiler, like people saw an episode down the road and then they would come back, and we don't talk about that. It's only theories, what we think might happen. So, or people on Reddit that have deciphered and broken literal codes to find out what's going to happen. That's the only thing we talk about in that session. But we keep it at the end because some people don't even want to have that. So now we're on to the main loop. This is what happened this episode.
So, for me, when somebody says, if you're a first-time listener, I'm sorry, that's a pretty red flag that whatever you just said should be on the editing floor. And for me, I get it's an inside joke between you and Aaron about the Lost thing, but I know for me, I was like, wait, what? It was a little like, I don't know. Eric, what were your thoughts on that little tangent there?
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's so many things that in this clip here. You do so much good in this episode. You talk about a lot of points. You know what you're talking about, and when you really have passion, you slow down, and that passion comes through. But again, right here, as Aaron starts going through the setup of the show, I thought he does a nice job setting up the segments of the show. But again, he's done it a million times and he rips through it so fast. I don't know which parts are actual segments to the show and which parts are things he's just talking about. Like it confused me. I liked the fact that you guys are setting up the show, and I like you're okay. First, we're going to go through the loop, then we're going to go through listener feedback, and then whatever the benchmarks are. So I know when I hit those signposts going through, The fact that this came 4.5 minutes into the show, I thought that probably should have been a little earlier. Like, hey, if you're new to the show, here's what we do. We hit 4 segments in the show. Segment A is the loop. Segment B is listener feedback. Segment 3 is, and you walk through each signpost for me, and then give me a tease, like, hey, and then later on in the episode, when we get to breaking the code, Aaron's going to tell you about the thing he believes the red ball is all about, or whatever. Give me, like, hook me, make me want to stick around and figure out what that part is all about. When you go off into the lost tangent, that again throws me off of the signposts I'm trying to decipher. Like, okay, I'm looking for the signposts as we go down this journey, but now I'm distracted by this lost kind of conversation. And those are the things that kill the momentum of the show. The show's already an hour and a half long. I mean, the show's longer than the show itself. Like, yeah. I could have gone and watched the entire episode and watched half of it again by the time this episode's over. And I don't dislike the fact that it's 90 minutes long, but I want to feel some momentum in it. And when you guys get in the middle of this, like 45, 60 minutes into this episode, and you guys are having passionate conversations about what you believe in your theories and what Aaron believes in his theories, there's some tension there, and I'm sitting on the edge of my chair, and we have some momentum going. But then all of a sudden you guys start clowning, and you're like, well, you go ahead and finish your gobbledygook there before we get into that, and it just brings the whole conversation to a halt. That's what these little side tangents do. It's not that they're bad. Touch on them, but keep moving forward.
Makes sense.
Yeah, there was one that I thought was cute because it was really quick, and that was this one.
She's filled with rage and anger, where Maeve is filled with familial bond. Mother's bond. She wants her baby back. I
knew that was coming next.
Damn it! Why did I make myself do it? I should just walk.
I was holding back.
And then you went right back to it. So to me, I thought, okay, that was kind of cute, and it kind of showed. For me, how long have you known Aaron? Because you guys have a really good chemistry together.
Yeah, I think we met TV Talk days, so 2013-ish, 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. So about 7 years now. But we've also done, because we do the Blacklist Exposed together as well. So that we've done over 150 episodes of now. So it's a lot of talking to each other.
Yeah, tell me about your typical audience member, because that was the one thing for me that I was like, well, let me play one clip. This is where at the end of the show you're reading audience feedback, and this is where I went, this is you reading an email from a listener.
But this was one of the finest hours of television I have ever seen. Everything about this episode was so much better than the previous 3 episodes. I felt like I was watching a different show. Unbelievable tension, depth, storytelling, script, and cinematography. Wow, I am back on board. So
the fact that the viewer is paying attention to things like cinematography, I was like, okay, wow, this is because there's a fair amount of this. Are you guys with me? Because I'm the reason I asked that is I got a weird noise in my thing, and Troy looked like he's locked up.
Nope, I'm here.
He's here. Okay,
good. You skipped a little bit. I'm back now.
Okay, edit point 1. Yay. Let me do one thing here because I have everything closed. Yeah. Okay. So Troy, tell us a little bit about your audience, because they seem to there seems to be almost like a screenwriters. For a second there, I was like, is this a bunch of screenwriters? Because you guys talk a lot about the story. So tell me a little bit about your audience.
I think when we started out the show initially, we wanted to focus on, let's put a lost card again, but it was that kind of recapturing that lost experience that people had in the 2005 to 2010 run of the show, where it was this community that was very heady, very want to go deeper than just the surface area of the show. Like, oh, it's Susie and Joey and laugh track and that kind of stuff. Those shows are fun and they have their place, but we really wanted to focus on the fans they want to sit down and just escape for an entire hour, go somewhere completely different that's not their real life. And then when they're in that space, be willing to not only sit in that space, but then go one step further. What's the philosophical thing I can take away? What is the one thing I learned from this episode that I could apply to my real life? And those people tend to be a bit more educated, maybe a little bit more upper bracket income. And because of that, we figured we'd have some really good philosophical conversations out of it. And some of those people tend to be real nerdy. Some people probably be more, depending on the nerd or the geek scale. I don't want to offend any community. We're all inclusive here at Beyond Westworld. But yeah, probably in that realm. And then, just some more affluence to it for obviously from advertisers' sake and whatever. But I think having that really good conversation around like, what is it that we want to experience watching the show every week? What makes us come back every week? But more importantly, when it's all said and done, do I feel like I wasted my time, or do I feel like I actually grew as a person? And people that want to do that, I think, are the people that we want to try to reach.
Because with 29,000 people in Facebook, you're definitely reaching some people. And for me, it reminded me at times a little bit of either my ethics class or my philosophy class in college, where you had these super like deep, like, well, what if somebody thought this? Well, what is the meaning of the word "the" kind of stuff that you're like trying to figure it out? And I know here's just one quick clip where you guys were talking about the story arc.
I don't want to discredit it. I don't think it's the right call either. But there are a lot of things and a lot of hints in this episode, especially in those conversations with Jim, where you're kind of like, okay, maybe it is plausible. Maybe that's where the end of the beginning and the beginning at the end comes from.
I 100% said it was plausible. I'm saying I don't think it would be a good storytelling choice. I really don't. I think he's had a good human arc, and I really want to see that human arc play.
So it's kind of like if I was writing the show, I would have so-and-so do this and that. And that's when I was kind of like, well, I knew immediately, like going in, I'm like, this is not well, here's what happened on the show. We're not going to do any spoilers, but it was very like, and it seemed like you ended up in almost every character's head. Like, what was this person thinking, and what was this person, and what would they do, and what were their motives in this scene? And it just seemed like you went into every detail to where, to me, again, it seemed a little bit almost like a screenwriting type, like a story. I mean, Westworld is the stage, but the purpose of the show was to really examine the story. So that's why I was asking about that. Eric, what were your thoughts on some of the deep dives?
I liked it as well. I thought it's a nice combination of kind of like a fan podcast meets a critical writing podcast. Like there are some points in the discussion where you're totally fanning out. Like, I love the show, I love the character, I love the storyline. And then there are other parts of the episode where you get into that story arc and character development sort of critique. And I thought that was really cool because you don't fall 100% onto one side or the other. It's like you truly appreciate the show for what it is and for it being a television production. But on the other side of it, it's you're critiquing it in a way that somebody who really appreciates the art would critique it and how they might improve their art rather than just watching it because, you're on borderline fanaticism where you believe the people are real, and, Jim's you meet the guy in person, you go, Jim, I love you. And they're like, oh, I'm not Jim. I'm really Bob. I just play Jim on the show. No, you're Jim, so it's not crazy fanaticism. But I can tell you appreciate the show. And even if you weren't doing the podcast, you would sit down and watch it every week because you enjoy it. I like that kind of combination of the two approaches together. Makes the show unique.
Yeah, it was kind of intentional when we designed it that way because we said, well, anybody can go out to Entertainment Weekly and read the recap.
Yeah.
We don't need to tell you what you already saw, right? You saw it. So
right.
No one's going to listen to that on a podcast. But we also didn't want to be the 3-hour AP class, even though I know sometimes in this episode we got there in particular just because of the content of this episode.
Yeah.
Hey, this isn't your straight ahead Westworld show. This is the AP level Westworld right here.
That's right.
This one is.
And there are a few of those out there that we're competing against. So we're trying to where's the happy medium where we can keep people entertained, but yet have a good dialogue that it makes worth doing the podcast, the time putting into the podcast worth doing.
It's a tough line to walk, and I think you do it well. One thing I might suggest, though, because it is an after show show. You know, I think in the title on the website, it says after show companion, but you really don't mention that kind of in the upfront of the episode, in the introduction. And you might suggest that, like today we're talking about season 2, episode 4. If you haven't watched it yet, I'd highly recommend you go watch that first before you listen to the episode, because you're going to get a lot more out of the episode if you've seen it, if you've seen the show first before you come listen to our discussion about it. Not that we're going to spoil anything, but you'll kind of understand our references a little better. You might think about putting that kind of up front. I think a lot of people who are fans of shows and listen to these kind of podcasts kind of get that. But if I just stumbled upon this, like, oh, you know what, Westworld, I kind of like that show, and I click play because it was recommended to me. You know, people who like this show also like that show, and so I just click play and listen to it. It might put it in perspective for me if I was a new listener coming in season 2, episode 4.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to balance, and probably why we came on to do the review show, was trying to figure out, do we do it from a standpoint of give enough information that if you hadn't seen the episode, you could listen to this and be like, oh, okay, I don't need to watch the episode now. Thanks for saving me an hour. Or should we focus more on the people that have watched the episode, dive deep into the episode, and give those people extra content? I think that's we're trying to be serve both masters, I think, with the podcast currently.
I would not do that. I'd pick one, definitely. And I would pick the people who have already seen the show. Those are your super fans. Those are the ones you want to cater to. The 29,000 people in your Facebook group aren't over there because they're not watching the show. They're there because they want to talk about the show and they've seen it. They're like, I don't want to spend an hour for watching the show. I just want to come hang out on Facebook. That's not happening. These are people who enjoy watching the show. How do we convert some of those 29,000 into podcast listeners? How do we teach them how to listen to the show? But I would definitely super serve the people who have seen the episode. You can always make recommendations during the show. You do it a few times, like the clip Dave played. Hey, if you're a new listener, XYZ. If you're a new listener, we go through 4 benchmarks in the show. Or if you're a new listener, this is the part of the show where we answer listener feedback. And if you want to give us listener feedback, you can do that via Twitter over at Beyond Westwood World, or, things like that, where you can make it comfortable for new listeners, but they're more of the, oh, by the way, rather than the people that you're creating your content for.
Makes sense.
In fact, you had one little clip here I'm going to play where I thought it was interesting, because I think you realized just how deep in the woods you were, and I forget who kind of paraphrases here, but
he's not facing what happened with his wife. He's running from his daughter and what his daughter said to him. He's running from it.
Gotcha.
So he needs to go back and deal with that. That's kind of how I saw it.
Running from your problems instead of facing them head on.
Yeah. I guess if you want to make it easy, sure.
I'd
rather bumble everything I said and make it confusing for everyone.
No problem.
All right.
Glad I can help.
So I thought that was kind of funny.
I like to see more of that come out of you two, because, if both of you have the same opinion, then one of you really isn't necessary, right? And so the fact that Aaron has these long diatribes and he goes on and pontificates for 2.5 minutes, and then you come in and sum it up with 6 words, I think that sets the two of you apart. That's the difference in your personality. I'd like to see more of that come out in the show. It does occasionally.
Yeah,
I think you could use it a lot more.
I've got a clip here, and I thought that's what I liked about this, because it wasn't what do you think, Eric? I like it. Me too. Okay. It was like, and so here's a quick clip with Aaron kind of holding your feet to the fire.
Because Ford was controlling him previously, but Ford was also alive. I mean, he made that comment that Ford was dead. So can Ford manipulate him still or not? I guess that is the open question.
See, sometimes I forget. I got to remind you that we're on a podcast. So when I ask you a question, it's okay for you to actually answer it. You don't have to just tell me what the question is again. What do you think? Can she trust him?
Absolutely. I think at this point she can.
Okay. Was that so hard? It's easy. What do you have to say?
I have to process it, though. I mean, there are different answers depending on how you want to view what your viewpoint is.
I don't think you processed it. You just said another question. You're like the show. You just give them more questions, man. Just give some answers. Chop, chop.
But and I want to play one other clip, because Eric was talking about how you guys do have discussions, and they're deep discussions, and they're it's almost like not a courtroom, but it's like here's my evidence. And you guys were talking about how many time periods was the guy's name is escaping.
Yeah, Bernard. Yeah.
Bernard, how many? And so here's a quick clip of this where you're both trying to persuade the other person.
I see it as 3 distinct time periods. When each one starts and finishes, that's where it can be a little hazy and up to debate. But I definitely, for me, specifically see 3 time periods.
Okay, I see 2 time periods. I see we just left the fort. Clementine is dragging Bernard, and Clementine drops him off at the cave and throws a gun down for him, which is clearly present when he comes in the cave and finds Elsie. So that's all one time period, which is the 2 weeks ago from present day, right? Because present day is Strand. So 2 weeks ago, Bernard finds Elsie in the cave.
Mm-hmm.
And he's flashing back to potentially when he dropped Elsie off in that cave originally, and he had to go to this place in order to go find the red ball that Ford sent him there to go get, which is why I think the red ball's brain is Ford's brain specifically, because Ford was the one that actually was able to figure out how this process actually worked. So there's only 2 time periods.
3, because you also have the one where he is obviously by himself and he's remembering Elsie, which means that would be behind him. It'd have to be a memory because it's behind him. And he's there in that room by himself.
So when I heard that, I was like, this is a deep dive. 2 guys very passionate about, no, dude, you're crazy. It's 2. No, it's 3 because she was behind him. No, and I was like, and that's when I was kind of like, okay, who's the audience for this again? And that's when I got to the end and I heard these other people talking about cinematography and the director. And I love the fact that the musical score, I was like, these are people that are watching the show one frame at a time, I think in some cases. Eric, any thoughts on that?
No, I love these passionate discussions. I think this is when I talked earlier that the show slows down when you kind of get off on tangents. This is the opposite. This is the momentum I'm talking about, because this is like I can't turn away because I need to see how it comes to a conclusion. I need to see how the argument resolves itself. This is where the momentum of the show really gets good, right here in the middle of this juicy part. The first clip you played, Dave, my favorite line in that is where Aaron goes, "You're just like the show. I ask you a question, you give me another question rather than giving me some answers. I'm just looking for answers."
And I can't remember what this clip, I have a lot of clips. They're all fairly short. I just have this one labeled, and I mean this with utmost respect. It says deep thoughts and dad humor. So it goes a little something like this.
I don't think it's immoral. I mean, it's probably inadvisable, but I don't think it's immoral. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to try? If you could find a way to extend your life, why wouldn't you want to try? I mean, hell, half of us would be vampires if they'd let us.
Nah, not a blood guy.
You know what?
Maybe
it'd be cool.
I drink
because if I could
spinal tap, maybe drink some spinal fluid, but not blood.
You heal really fast. You look sexy. Everywhere you go, fog follows you. I kind of dig it. I want to be a vampire.
You were only sexy if you were a lost boy, though.
That was one that I was like, all right, that was a weird tangent.
Yeah. And this is one where the momentum slows down, right? Because we were in a solid discussion, and all of a sudden we're at the Lost Boys. I'm like, great movie, but now how are we going to get back over there where we just were 2 minutes ago? Like,
which for us is funny because we're like, okay, so now I said Lost, so then Aaron's going to go into there he goes talking about Lost again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
it's only funny for Aaron and I. It's not funny for the audience.
Right. I have a bunch. I'll play one more. This is just another example of you guys really getting into storytelling elements.
I get that. What I'm saying is the last season, clever. This season, still clever. If they continue to do it, if they do it another character next year, stops being clever and starts being a gimmick. It really becomes something where I get it that you've already built it in there, but it's also kind of a way to play with the audience and play with their expectations to a degree. And I don't know if it becomes respectful to fans if you keep doing it. It starts to be like you're intentionally just trying to confuse them. You know what I mean? It's I'm not saying that they've done it yet, and I fully am saying that they haven't done it yet, but I can see how it easily could be a problem down the road.
So again, kind of an Aaron in his, if I was writing the show, thing. That's when I was like, okay, does he have any kind of screenwriting background, or is that something he aspires to do, or
Well,
is
his
he a
other
writer?
podcast, the Hollywood Outsider. I mean, it's a full TV. It's more film critic review.
Okay.
He watches a lot of movies, goes to South by Southwest, writes all the reviews. So he's got a lot of background, and then film studies is kind of like been his thing.
Yeah. And then I had one other clip again that kind of, I was like, because part of me was like, man, this is a deep dive into some of this stuff. But here's another clip of you guys reading a listener email.
David Aspinall said, "We got someone else back besides Elsie. Did anyone recognize two of the Ghost Nation prisoners as the married couple guest from season 1? They broke up Hector's first Sweetwater raid, shot him in the back of the neck. Love all the little nudge, nudge, wink, wink moments in this series."
So when I heard that, I was like, that's who's listening. These are the people like, hey, did you see those guys that got shot in the head in season 1? They're back in season 2. And I was like, I just don't watch TV that way. So, and I was like, okay, now I understand why these deep conversations about, time travel and all this other stuff. I'm like, this is exactly connecting with that kind of audience, I would think. So, Eric, any other thoughts on the general kind of, I know you'd mentioned sometimes, that's most of the clips I have. I mean, we could sit here all day and kind of keep playing this. But in terms of, I know you'd mentioned, and I'm with Eric. I like I can really see people. Like, I thought the one about the different time travel thing was a great example of you guys really like, no, here's why. No, because she was behind him. And I was like, it's a great example of you two really getting into why you think who's what. And the great thing is the audience then has to pick a side, or they might be saying, no, I think there's 4. You never know. But I could see an audience like this going, no, I think Troy's got it. There's only 2. And then, no, Aaron's going to go, no, Aaron, he's got it. It's 3 or whatever. And then they're going to take it over to the Facebook group and duke it out. But Eric, did you have any other thoughts or things that you noticed?
One thing I'd like to see in the show is a little production value. At the beginning, we talked about you setting up the signposts and the benchmarks throughout the show of the different segments that you go through. But it was tough for me to catch those segments as a new listener when we got to them, because again, you kind of rush through those signposts, and I wasn't really sure if this was the beginning of a segment or if it was just a throwaway comment. There's one time you say, we're getting close to working out the kinks. We've already talked about that. And I couldn't remember if working out the kinks if that was a segment of the show or if that was just something we brought up. So, I don't want to hear you say, now it's time to get into working out the kinks, but maybe some sort of production value that introduces that particular segment. So I know we're kind of transitioning from one bit to the next. That would kind of help me pick it out. But in that particular one right there, you say, we're getting close to working out the kinks. We've already talked about that. Well, and that was like the second or third time I heard you say we've already talked about that. So if we've already talked about it, either we shouldn't bring it up again, or we shouldn't talk about it and we should save it for when we're supposed to talk about it. Because when you say things like we've already talked about that, it signals to the audience that we're going in circles. Like we're just back rehashing the same turf we tread, and then like a minute later you said we already talked about that again about something else. And so I'm like, okay, now we're twice in a minute we've said we've already talked about that. So now I don't see any new content coming my way. All we're doing is in talk radio, the talk radio host gets a caller on the air and says, "Hey, Dave, welcome to the show." And Dave says, "I think the mayor's a crook because, when I saw him at the thing, he was putting his trash in another guy's dumpster and the guy's a crook." And you're like, "Yeah, well, I don't think he's really a crook." And, and you have that conversation. Well, it's called a call circle. By the time you get to the top of the call circle, the caller says, "Well, like I said, I think he's a crook because I saw him putting his trash can." So the key being a talk show host is to get out of the call before you close the call circle. So before the caller is able to say, "Well, like I said," or, "Well, I'm just trying to say," or whatever. He gets to about 11 o'clock on the call circle, that you eject. Dave, thanks for the call. We're going to Troy now. Troy over in Huntsville. What do you got? And then,
but he's a crook. Yeah.
right.
As you
So,
hang up.
because if you get to the top of the call circle and they say, well, like I said, now you're just going around the circle again. So if we've already talked about it, there's no sense in talking about it again.
That makes sense. Or cut it out and put it on the cutting room floor, right?
Yes, exactly.
We already talked about that. Just cut that hole out, and then you never know that you did talk about it or whatever.
Right. Exactly. Take it out, move along.
Yeah,
For sure.
there is
actually, I want to go back to Eric real quick on the production value. So in each segment, there is there's the barn doors to go through the main loop. Then there was the shotguns, and then there was the sword cuts for breaking the code.
and it sounds like this.
If you have to know all the ins and outs, it's finally time to break the code.
Well, Aaron made me share two of my fun things already. The Lost versus Westworld experience and the Event Horizon Sam Neill versus Jim Delos experience. But Aaron, one of your favorite movies of recent memory was that of Ex Machina.
Sure was. That's a fantastic movie.
An AI that is put into a female robot. And did you remember the scene when Ava is dancing? And I thought that was kind of funny to have the relationship between the dance sequence in Ex Machina and the dance sequence that Jim Delos does in his second trip through his iteration.
Again, I say happy coincidence.
Did you recognize it though, or did you not even think about it?
So it's a very quick. The thing I thought was interesting about that is you go, this is where we go deeper. And there was a part of me that goes, there's deeper? Holy cow. Like, are you kidding me?
Is this the first benchmark we get to from the beginning of the show?
No, this is the one,
because that's the first sound effect I remember hearing, and that's like an hour and a half into the show.
Yeah, there's definitely three, because then we do the open of the show with the profiling or guest survey question of the week, then the barn doors to go into the main loop, and then there's the gun pistols for the listener corral, because you're corralling up the people. And then it's the break the code to cut the sword fight. It was because of episode 5 specifically, because there was a samurai episode. So we said, let's use swords this year. So
I don't have any idea how I missed those. Like, because I remember we got to this part. I remember the swords specifically, but I don't remember barn doors and gunshots. So somehow in my head, I missed it. I apologize.
Well, no, and that's kind of the question. Is it too quick? Because we are on the side of like music for the sake of nothing, to use the Dave Jackson line. Do we play music to make it longer and it's like a 10-second thing or a 5-second thing? Or is it better to do the quick in and out? And maybe it's too quick. I don't know.
For me, for the breaking the code one, for those who want to make it deeper. And then when I finally figured out what you guys were doing, like is breaking the code where you've seen something in another movie and we think we saw a very similar thing in this episode. Is that basically it?
Or there's stuff on Instagram, or there's stuff on the website. There's other ancillary things that aren't in the episode itself. Like if you really want to go deep, like, hey, did you see that there was this Instagram post where if you turn it upside down and spin it twice, you'll actually see this code, which you can put in this website. Which then this website will tell you, oh, hey, it's actually this character that's going to come up next week.
Because for me, I kind of thought just a little more description besides if you want to go deeper. Like,
Sure.
Well, you just said, hey, this is where we take things from Instagram and blah, 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 and we break it down. Because to me, breaking the code was kind of, I don't know, just to me, I was like, okay. And then as I listen to what you're doing, I'm like, oh, they're comparing it to other movies that I haven't seen. So,
Sure.
Yeah, maybe that's what it needs. I don't think the sound effects need to be longer. To me, the swords kind of sounded almost too long. Maybe it's more of an explanation of the segment itself, like the purpose of it. Where you go, shing, shing, shing. Let's get into breaking the code. This is where we find the Easter eggs that are outside of the episode, and we tie them back in. This week we discovered on Instagram about the thing where you flip it and you twist it and you turn it. And then if you take it over, maybe it's just a little more of an explanation. Sometimes we get a little too cool for the room with the titles that we choose. You know, a lot of people do that with their podcasts. You think the podcast is about one thing and it's about something completely different because the title's too cool for the room and, you know, a little too clever. You know, and sometimes just telling people exactly what you're going to do. Listener mailbag tells me exactly what it is.
Right.
You know, if I
This-
call it, you know, some
this-
sort of,
This is where me and Eric break down the bandwidth. You know, and you're like,
Yeah,
"Wait,
right.
What?
What the heck are you talking about? So, yeah, maybe it's just a one sentence kind of introduction of the. I want to prevent you from getting into now it's time for though. So it's a very slippery slope there. You don't want to get into. I have to telegraph where we're going, but you do want to give a little bit of meat there, so I kind of understand that we're down the path. So naturally, let it flow into. You know, let's get into listener mailbag. How many emails did we get this week, or something like that?
Well, see, and I just had, because I just watched an episode last night, I didn't even think about it. Went right over my head. Breaking the code is because all these robots are walking around with a tablet in their pocket, and all you got to do is pull out their tablet and hit a couple buttons, and you redo their code. Hence, breaking the code. That just now hit my. I was like, it bounced off my forehead. I was like, oh yeah, the robot thing, the code. That's why they're. Oh, I get it. So I think if I was a little more, if I was in the middle of the season, that one would have caught on, but. That's why I didn't. I was like, breaking the code. Oh, okay. Well, and I thought it was like the code of storytelling. Like, did you see it over here? Well, they pulled it and used it over here. So I didn't even think about the code. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good point because right at the top of the show, when Aaron's like, "Welcome to Beyond Westworld," and boy, do we have a blank for you. Yeah. The boy, we have a vacation for you was the thing that was said by the reporter in the very first movie. And so we were like, oh, let's like use that every week. Like, boy, do we have a vacation for you was the very first episode. But then we changed the last word to be something that's specific about each episode. So this week it was the devil has an offering speech that Jim Delos gives. We're like, boy, do we have an offering for you. And then we kind of went in, but it's like real deep dive listeners are going to catch that. But the general audience is going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? What?
One other thing I'd like to see you guys do is use your names a little bit more for new listeners that come along so they can figure out which one's which. And you don't have to do it completely over the top, but I really only heard, I think Aaron mentioned your name one time in the conversation. You know, he's something like, oh, there goes Troy again, and down the lost path, you know, or something like that. I'd like to see a little more of that, just dropping it in here and there. It helps us put a name to the voice.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And we'll go ahead and wrap up the audio part before we jump into the looking at the website. I believe it made me feel great because I am the king of multiple calls to action. It's hard to do just one. I believe I counted 8.
I was listening to the November episode you guys did with the AP professor.
Yeah.
In preparation for tonight, and I was like, oh man, there's like 12 call to actions.
Yeah, I think there's 8.
What's
funny is you
buckle up. Here it comes.
You tell them to subscribe, and then later Aaron comes on and goes, "Don't forget to subscribe." I'm like, in case you missed it the last 4 seconds ago. All right, well here's the end of the show.
All right, I think it's gonna do it for this episode. I'm gonna go watch the Lost season or series finale and remind myself how that show missed all the questions it could have answered. Until next time, I'm your creative director, Aaron Peterson. You can hear me talking about movies and TV on The Hollywood Outsider, as well as Remake This Movie Right, and both can be found.
Okay, hold on. I got to stop that. Notice how he's talking about his stuff again. You can find me all the time. I'm Hollywood Important. I'm like, dude, what? Okay, sorry.
I think it's going to do it for this episode. I'm going to go watch the Lost season or series finale and remind myself how that show missed all the questions it could have answered. Until next time, I'm your creative director, Aaron Peterson. You can hear me talking about movies and TV on The Hollywood Outsider, as well as Remake This Movie Right, and both can be found at thehollywoodoutsider.com, as well as my new podcast, Smirk, which is a lot of fun. Check that out.
And I'm at Troy Heinrichs on Twitter. We'll finish off the Blacklist season this week over at theblacklistexposed.com, plus coming back for season 6 next year. So be sure to subscribe to the Blacklist Exposed podcast in your favorite podcast player of choice. And check out all of our other great podcasts here on Golden Spiral Media by going to goldenspiralmedia.com/podcasts. Big thanks for listening this week. Don't forget to answer our guest survey question for next week. Is the pursuit of immortality morally ethical? yes or no, and comment with your thoughts.
Please do. Yeah, please do. Be sure to subscribe, submit your feedback, and remember to come back next week when we reopen the park for another vacation.
Lost in Westworld.
Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch.
And it's not lost all the time. It's just this
Yeah.
one particular episode had some very lost tendencies, so we like tied it all together. It's supposed to be for another vacation beyond Westworld, but I had to throw. I had to get one less dig in there.
I loved Lost in Westworld. That was the funniest part of the show. I was like, yes, like he can't do anything. The show's over. Like they're rolling credits. We can't. He's got no time to get in, which was awesome. I loved it. One thing I loved about the ending was that it was fun. The thing I didn't like about it is that it had 8 calls to action. You know, I think you mentioned 5 other podcasts in the end of this episode. One tip for you: if the question of the week is if you is immortality moral, yes or no, and why? If you want the why, don't frame it as a yes/no question. If you say why is the pursuit of immortality immoral? If people don't think it's immoral, they will tell you it's not immoral. You're crazy because if it was immoral, yada 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 yada. Pick a side, and you'll piss off the people on the other side. So if you want the why, then don't ask a question.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think because sometimes we toggle between the, well, crap, we have 30,000 people. How many of these are we going to read before people get bored?
Right.
So sometimes, like, should we just do a yes/no poll? I don't know. But then sometimes you want the actual dialogue because it's an interesting topic. So yeah, I have to figure out how to work that next season.
Well, and that can always be something where, you know, you pick the top 10 responses or whatever, you know, and that way people, it's not a case where all I have to do is answer and I get on the show. It's like, wow, I finally got an answer on the show. So it makes them come up with a better answer maybe. The one thing I found as we get to your website here,
which I should preference as you get into that we were on Golden Spiral Media for season 1 and season 2, and now we've moved back over to Aaron's The Hollywood Outsider Network. So there was a shift in that. So when you're like, hey, why is there no Golden Spiral Media stuff on the website? That's why.
Okay, because
it's on a new place.
Got it. Because the one thing I think at the beginning, do you say part of Golden Spiral Media?
I believe so.
Okay, because I know in the middle you did something and you said if for feedback, it's feedback at Golden Spiral Media, but the website is
BeyondWestworldPodcast.com.
and not, so it's not feedback at BeyondWestworldPodcast.com, because that would be a cool way to just keep your brand consistent.
And that was part of the challenge that we were having, was because everything on Golden Spiral is running through the Golden Spiral brand. That's why we were like, maybe we don't want to do the network thing. Maybe we want to do our own thing, so we can do BeyondWestworldPodcast.com/Dolores in 4K or something. But we couldn't do that with the Golden Spiral Media because everything was on the one website, and everything was a page on the website versus its standalone website. And so that's why we're like, maybe we should just do this on our own if we're going to keep going.
Got it.
That's good to know, because that Golden Spiral website, man, my eyes started to cross. Because the more I scrolled down, the more podcasts popped up. Like, it's a dynamic website. And so you think, oh, here's 8 podcasts. No, wait, there's 12 hold on, 16 like they just kept coming. And I was like, where does this stop? So then I hovered over podcasts to find your show. And man, the number of shows there was like outrageous. I couldn't believe how many podcasts were there. So then when I click on Beyond Westworld, it takes me over to the Hollywood Insider podcast page, where then I needed to again select Beyond Westworld from that podcast drop down. So that was a little clunky. The episode page itself I liked. I thought it was laid out nice. I liked the cool the video clips. I thought that added a lot of flavor to the episode page. I don't know if those were clips from that particular episode or trailers from that episode or whatever they were, but it was cool. It just added some life to the typical static episode page. I thought you had a nice recap of the episode. My favorite part about it, being a guy who has never watched the show, at the very bottom of the episode page, you have an about Westworld thing down there. It tells me back in 1973 the movie came out, and then the whole thing, like, it's a nice little synopsis of, oh well, that's cool, here's what it's all about. So if I just came to the particular page from Apple Podcasts or wherever I come from, and I land on this, it tells me exactly what it's all about. It's a nice little capsule that stands alone amongst this other breadth of information.
Yeah, the only thing I thought, because when I came out here, I don't know who's doing all the gifts. I think you mentioned somebody in your episode where they're doing all these little, baby movies here that compare, one bloody face to the other, and you got the soon to be dead guy doing disco dancing and all sorts of fun stuff. And the thing I thought of when I saw the bike, there was a scene that they kept going back to this guy riding the bike. I'm like, oh my God, Peloton exists in Westworld. That's kind of wild. That was kind of fun.
Is he listening to the Fugees?
Yeah. The only thing I thought of, and I don't know how you would fix it, and it's not really broken. It just, there is not a lot of white space on this.
Right.
There's just tons of buttons everywhere, which I get because you want people to subscribe. You want people to be patrons. You want them to shop on Amazon. So I'm not sure how to fix it. I just remember thinking, wow, it's a lot of just info. And I wasn't sure. I don't know. What were your thoughts, Eric, in that department? Because it seems, everything was, I didn't have any problems finding things. It was just a matter of, like, when I get to, if I go back here, and what I'm doing is on their website, I'm clicking and I'm going back to Beyond Westworld. It gives me a nice list of all your episodes, and you've got some really nice graphics, which I thought is cool. But here, and I thought you did a great job of explaining that it's the one about the mystery of the Sphinx, which I thought was cool. And then you got a read more button here, so it's all easy to find. It just, everything's, it just seems like everything is a little bit on top of each other. But on the other hand, so that's on one side, but on the other hand, you do a nice job with all the graphics. So I can tell that, these three things that we're looking at are all different episodes. So
I like this page right here because it's very uniform. All of the episodes stand out, so I can select which episode I want. When you go to the actual episode page, I didn't think the lack of white space was distracting for me. I typically expect white space on a home page or maybe a landing page. Once I get into the nitty gritty of the episode page, I don't mind it being as full as this page here. I think the right side where there's a lot of widgets, I think that's just the nature of the theme.
right.
But it looks a lot like you would see on Yahoo or some other website like that, where you're getting the bulk of the story on the left side and some widgets down the right side that lead you to other things that you might be interested in. To me, the white space wasn't as distracting because back on the directory page that we were on, it was uniform and there was some white space there, and that's kind of where I expect that to be.
Got it. Here's so you're saying you are leaving Golden Spiral, or you're not are you leaving them as a editor or just their website, or
Just the Westworld podcast specifically. Blacklist is still going to stay there.
got it? Yeah, because there are a lot of this is the lovely and talented Daryl Darnell.
Darnell.
Yeah, so
Actually, if you go to goldenspiralmedia.com/Westworld, I think that'll take you to the old page, which is still up and running. Last I checked, anyway. Yeah, there you go.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of nice white space.
I was going to say this one's a little less busy, I guess. And again, the busyness wasn't, crazy. It just, I was like, wow, there are a lot of buttons,
But again, this is the directory page. This isn't the episode page.
Right.
So I expect white space on a page like this. On the episode page itself, like, you're giving me hot links to stuff discussed in the episode and all of the goodness. So I almost expect that to have more content and kind of puffing out at the seams than a page like this would be.
Yeah, and you got the nice button there to leave voicemail. It's basically looks like the same. It looks like the same content. It's just without the
sidebar.
sidebar. Yeah. But the nice thing about that, and again, this is where I'm kind of nitpicking, is you do have all these, GIFs and things that really do draw your attention.
Yeah, I
So,
like those GIFs a lot.
Yes.
They make the whole page pop.
Yeah. So if anything, I feel sorry for the sidebar because I've heard people talk about there's kind of a sidebar blindness after a while. You just kind of ignore it, and this definitely would do that kind of thing. So yeah. So all in all, I'm with Eric. I thought it was if you're going to be on the Hollywood Insider, I would mention that then. So when people go to your website, although I think if I remember right, so I keep bouncing around here.
Yeah, we have the redirect in place, right? So
Yeah.
you go to beyondwestworldpodcast.com. Does the redirect for us. So we at least have our own domain name.
And I think you have your own header at the top, or is that on? Yeah, it's right there at the top. You have the Hollywood Insider, but you do have right beneath that, you've got your information below. So I know I'm on the right website. So, and I don't know that this, I would just, I guess, mention that part of the Hollywood Outsider maybe. And I think you did that at the end. So that if somebody sees that, they don't go, wait, what? Am I on the wrong website? And I don't think they would at that point.
Yeah, and I bet it'll probably change when we do season 3 in March. What we'd be like, welcome to Beyond Westworld. Like, we're part of the Hollywood Outsider Network, and because then it's new for season 3. The problem hasn't been on since 2018.
Forever, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Eric, any other thoughts on the website?
No, I like it. I think I like the dynamic lead up top. Yeah, I thought the website was solid.
Yeah. Awesome. So, Troy, any questions for us as we start to wrap things up?
No, I guess the question's for Eric since he doesn't watch the show. I mean, do you still find the podcast entertaining, not have seen the episode, contrasted to Dave, who's seen the episode, well, at least twice now, because he had to rewatch it the other night.
Well, it's kind of a trick question. It's not a podcast I would listen to because it's not a show that I watch. When you got into the really deep weeds where you were talking about, there was one clip that Dave played that went on. I mean, you guys got into a heavy discussion about, well, no, it was when Brenda did the thing and she went over to the tree and then Fred came along and Fred was wearing the thing. And then I started glazing over because I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are or how they relate to each other or anything like that. So those parts got a little too deep for me, and it was a challenge to stay focused. Other parts, like, was there 2 or was there 3? And you adequately described your 2 scenes, and Aaron adequately described his 3 scenes, where I could envision those and go, oh, yeah, I can see where he would think 3 and you would think 2. I can understand that. And those conversations were engaging for me because we weren't quite too deep into it that that I was getting lost. Where he was saying, well, no, because he's flashing back, he's remembering dropping her off, therefore it has to be a different point in time. I'm thinking, well, yeah, it's got to be a different point in time because it's a memory. So that would mean he was in a different place in time. I get that. I don't have to have seen the show to understand a discussion like that. So there were parts of the show I thought very engaging and very entertaining, even having not seen it. Other parts I thought we got really deep into it, and we were super serving the people we're supposed to super serve, and those are the super fans that watch the show and love sitting around talking about it.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of, I guess I hate to just lump it in with sci-fi, but if you think about it, the early, like, Star Trek 1.0 was really commenting on social circumstances and things like that. And so, but some people just see it as like, oh, good guys versus bad guys in a pew pew gun. They don't go deep at all. So that's not your audience. You're looking for the people that are like, no, I want to talk about this and how this really reflects on life and that whole 9 yards. And so that's where I thought it was cool. I appreciate the other thing we didn't mention. You guys do a lot of work. There's a lot of research in this where you're like, oh no, I read this article where she said. So you're reading articles from the director and all that other things. That's the other thing we should. I just appreciate it. I was like, okay, these guys just aren't watching the TV, writing down 4 bullet points and turning on a microphone. So it was another thing. I was like, wow, this is not only for the deep dive listener, but you guys have already done your deep dive, getting these golden nuggets from different interviews and things like that. That's just I'm not a deep dive person. Like right now, one of my favorite shows is This Is Us because it makes me cry every week, and everybody needs a good cry. And they had a cliffhanger where the one of the characters goes downstairs after he kisses his wife and everybody's in bed. He got home late and he goes into the kitchen and there's a guy with a knife. And so I saw on the internet today, they're like, this particular character has all sorts of anxiety. He really freaks out and he tends to like have nervous breakdowns when he gets in high pressure areas. And so the whole thing was, well, the guy's name is Randall. Was Randall imagining this, or is the guy really in the kitchen? And there are people that will have that discussion and they'll really like, no, because of this and that. And then there are people like me that like, I don't know, I'll tune in next week and find out. So I love the fact that you kind of know who your audience is, and we're going to do the deep dive stuff. And then the people that just want a recap of, hey, so-and-so rode in on a pony and they shot him, or that's not your audience. So you'll attract the people that like your kind of stuff. And I know, Eric, you were talking earlier, you said there were you were trying to do 2 different things. I think it was, right? What was that, Troy? You said you weren't sure which way you wanted to go.
Yeah, and I think Eric made a good point. Even though he's probably not the target audience because he doesn't watch the show, when we think about the new listener, we have to remember that the new listener is a new listener of the podcast, but they're not necessarily a new watcher of the show. I think what we're trying to do too much of is, well, what about the people that aren't watching the show? How do we get them excited and try to get them to watch the show? Because that's probably what HBO wants us to do, is get more people to watch the show. But really for us, we should focus on retaining the audience that you currently have, because let's face it, season 2 had some spots like that one emailer said, where it's like, man, first 3 episodes, I hated it. Like 4 finally brought me back in. Like those are the people we need to reach and say, no, stick around. You're going to love what's coming next. And if we focus on them,
I think you can't. I think you can't spend a whole lot of time focusing on the people who don't yet watch the show. I think there will be very few of those people who come to your podcast. Your podcast is designed for people who have already seen the episode and now we're discussing it. It would be like walking into a sports bar discussing a football game that's already happened. And you're like, well, crud, I don't even watch the Cleveland Browns. I don't know how I'm going to sit and have the discussion about the game. Like I'm lost. I wouldn't be here for that. So I think focusing on the people that are your true fans, I think people are going to be turned on and sampling the television show by seeing other people talking about it on social media, or their friends said, man, you really got to check it out. It's a great series. That's how people are going to learn about it, through that word of mouth. I don't think your show's designed to do that. My challenge coming into reviewing an episode like this with a show that I've never watched is I'm trying to give you feedback on your presentation style and just the structure of the show in general, not necessarily the content that you're discussing on the show, because I don't know if you're right or wrong or indifferent, but I can tell the debates that you and Aaron have are passionate and have 2 sides to the story. That's what I love about it. I love that when you guys create great momentum by getting in the middle of those things. I love when you touch on the baby back and it's just a touch and go. It throws me off when we stop down and start having a long discussion about vampires. So, I'm trying to help you with those sorts of things.
And Eric mentioned Lost twice.
Yeah.
I'm actually, every time I say, well, yeah, but now I'm lost, I'm thinking I said Lost again. Tally.
Yeah.
One of the favorite things, Dave didn't play the clip of it, but he says, I'll give you $5 if you don't say possibly no potentially I'll give you $5 if you don't say potentially for 5 minutes and you made it through the 5 minutes, but at the end of the episode I think you said potentially like I
8
was
times.
counting them.
Yeah.
I was counting them. You said it like 4 times in the last 3 minutes of the episode.
Yeah, it's the Lee words for me. I've noticed it's potentially, basically, definitely. I don't know what it is, but
those little nuances like that, Troy, those are what bring out your personality. And I love the fact that you rib each other about those little things, but make them touch and go, because you can scatter them through the show. It won't derail your momentum, but it will highlight your persona and your that's how people get to know who you are, and that's how they get to like you. They know your little nuance that we know that you're a fan of Lost just by you mentioning the show and Aaron ribbing you about it throughout the episode. We get to know you because of those little things. Just be careful that they're quick and to the point, and you move on. You just throw them in like little Easter eggs every now and then.
And the case in point, when you mentioned the Lost Boys, and you're only sexy if you're a Lost Boy vampire, and I was like, wait a minute, wasn't Corey fine? Like who were the Lost Boys?
Feldman.
Yeah,
Corey
Feldman.
Feldman. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess. So I'm totally.
Kiefer Sutherland though wasn't he? Was the head Lost
guy.
Boy.
Yeah, the whole time I'm like, well, who was in the Lost Boys? So then, about the time my brain started to remember the stuff from whatever year that movie came out was, you're like, okay. Meanwhile, back in Lost World, I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm trying to remember. Was Brad Pitt in that movie? I'm like, wait, no. So yeah, that was.
And it was funny because I just thought like Aaron totally walked into that one. I'm like, oh, he's gonna mention vampires. I could say Lost and talk about vampires in the same thing. This is great.
Yeah. So little focus maybe, I'm with Eric. Keep those in, but awesome. So, well, Troy, where can people find your podcast again?
For this one specifically, you can go to beyondwestworldpodcast.com and get ready for season 3, which will be coming out. I believe it's March 15th is the Sunday when season 3 will hit the airwaves. They're talking about 8 episodes. Not sure the length on those though. Sometimes they're 50 minutes and sometimes they're 5 hours. Depends what HBO wants to do.
Yeah, this one was an hour and 17. I was like, man, this is a movie. Holy cow. So, Eric, where can people find you?
Find me anytime you'd like over at podcasttalentcoach.com. How about you, Dave?
You can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. And of course, if you want to, Troy's got the seat warmed up for you. If you want your show right here, simply go to podcastreviewshow.com/review me. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Podcast Review Show.